Good morning, everyone. This is Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett. Pleasant good morning to you all. We didn't have Facebook Coffee with Stacey last Saturday, which would have been our normal Saturday, because it was the beginning of the year and I, like so many other parents, had a lot of running around to do to make sure that my kids were settled and ready for the school year. So sorry for that, but that's what I was working on last Saturday morning. Thankfully now, both of my children who are still at home in school are, I believe, settled for right now. Everybody is virtual for the minute. My son, who is in his last year of high school at Antilles, is going to be, had to do this quarantine for a little while, and then he'll be back on campus. Good morning, Cousin Carl. It's good to see you. Good to see everyone here this morning, those of you who are coming on. I was just surprised at the amount, it's always interesting to me on Facebook, like what gets people's attention. I posted a picture in that, what was it? Firstborn challenge with my oldest son, who I don't often see. He lives up in New York, and it was good to see the comments that people had about my firstborn, Mr. Jeremiah. So a lot of things are going on. 2020 has been something else, right? And first, I want to say that today is the anniversary of Hurricane Maria. 3 years ago today. It's so hard to believe that it's been 3 years that we went through that. I know that we did something about Hurricane Irma, but today would have been Hurricane Maria. So funny, last Friday, I had a chance with my staff to do a field trip to Buck Island. And a good friend of mine took us over, David Shang and his son Dylan. And we recalled that 3 years ago, we were together on a boat going over to St. Thomas and then over to St. John. And who was on the boat with us? It was like maybe it was 3 or 4 other boats coming over from St. Croix, going over to St. Thomas. Richard Mota was my press secretary then. We were sitting on a bunch of crates of water, and it just reminded us of the resilience and the love that Virgin Islanders have for one another. And how in times of trouble we stick together. We're going to need that. We're going to need that in the next couple of months as we not only try to get through the pandemic, but get through this election cycle. I want to give my condolences to the family of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, an absolutely phenomenal woman, born in 1933, when it was rare for women to go to law school, never mind just law school, but to be a working mother at that time. Her husband, who was also an attorney, was very ill when she was in law school, raised children while she practiced law, and eventually under President William Jefferson Clinton was seated on the Supreme Court bench and has just been a phenomenal justice, and really redefined how justice is seen, because it wasn't just about issuing opinions, but also speaking and giving scholarly thought on issues that she felt were of importance, and speaking out for those who cannot and do not have a strong voice as she did. So we are grateful and thankful that her family allowed her to do the work that she did and supported her, and that she was, with us to the very end, held on through so many bouts of cancer, so many illnesses to hold the seat that she had. And so I want to lift up my Brooklyn sister, the notorious RBG, to her legacy and what she means. So thank you so much to her and her family. Now I know we got some shout outs from quite a number of people, but good morning, Ms. Williams. Good morning to you. Good morning to everyone. But we've got some, I also want everybody to be aware that voter registration day, September 22nd. Please remember, if you are not registered to vote, please register to vote. Vote because you can vote. And I know we always talk about how, so many people died for you to have the right to vote. And I know that that doesn't really move a lot of people, it appears, or else people wouldn't vote. But people say they don't do politics, but politics does you. Politics does you every day, whether you do it, in terms of public housing, funding for roads, determination of that Supreme Court seat. Supreme Court has decided who people can marry, what kind of treatment you will get from employers, gender, racial, sexual orientation, discrimination. The thing that makes it so difficult to arrest or to sue a police officer, qualified immunity, is determined by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court composition is determined by not only the president, but who is in the Senate. So voting is important. Also, just as important is the guests that I have on today. And these are individuals who have dedicated themselves to counting numbers, to counting us, Virgin Islanders, which is so critically important. We are in the, every 10 years, we do a census, the Census 2020. And maybe it was 2 weeks ago, one evening I was home and was actually about to start cooking, and I heard a car almost screeching to a stop in front of my house in Christiansted, and someone knocked on the door, and I was like, I'm not expecting anybody at this time. And it was a census counter. And as they were going through the numbers and, asking me questions, I thought about my own life and my cousins and I looking back and finding census records of my grandparents, of my great-grandparents, and how important that has been to us to understand, grandfather was living with this person. He wasn't with his parents at that age, and that's probably why we're so close to this family. That connection was probably made during that time when he was living with his godmother or something. Census reveals so much about our history, but more importantly, the census really determines funding, determines how we are treated by the federal government. It allocates resources. Some jurisdictions, it determines how many members of Congress you have, how those lines are drawn. And so the census is incredibly important. And I'm grateful this early morning that two individuals were willing to come out and speak with me. They are the census managers of both the St. Croix as well as the St. Thomas District. I have Dr. Frank Mills. He is the census manager of the St. Thomas St. John District in this academic year. His previous position was acting director of the Eastern Caribbean Center and vice provost for research and public service at the University of the Virgin Islands. Wow, he is a graduate of CVI and also did his degree work in Canada as well as Massachusetts. And he's also served as the assistant director of the census in 1980. and was manager of the census in 1990, 2000, 2010. So Dr. Mills, we're going to have to get some history from you, not only about what's happening now, but the history of how things have changed in the census moving forward. How you've seen how numbers have been counted and what the impact has been. Also with us is Ms. Lorna Williams-Sutton, and she serves as the local census office manager in the St. Croix district. So the office managers, their response, she served at UVI in the local government and policy, budgetary, fiscal capacity. She has served as chief of staff for UVI Research and Technology Park, and has held positions at the Caribbean Exploratory Research Center, and many positions at the University of the Virgin Islands. And so the census manager's responsibilities include implementing office activities and field data collection, monitoring costs and progress reports of filed data collections, consulting with census advisors and census headquarters to rectify operational delays, delegating work, remedying deficiencies, overseeing supervision of several hundred employees to ensure that all staff not only are trained, but make sure that we maintain various contact with civic organizations, religious groups, and others to foster public cooperation as required. So thank you all for being with me this morning, and thank you for what you and your team are doing to support us all being counted. So Dr. Mills, can you first start and give us a little history about how you've seen the census change over time? What is important about the census to those who are listening to us right now?
Sure can. I can remember prior to 1980, when I was a relatively young professor at CBI, that we were approached by what used to be the Department of Commerce, the local government Department of Commerce. We were approached by them because they were the ones that interacted directly with the census at the time. But in short, they came to see us, and by us I'm referring to myself and to Dr. Orville Ken at the time. I was into research and statistics, and so they inquired of us whether we would not want to take on the challenge of conducting the census in 1980. So as young upstarts, we decided, sure, we can, and we responded to that challenge. So we started the process in 1980, and the college and the university has continued that tradition since 1980. So it pretty much has found its home at UBI now, and that is how I'm still involved in this process. What among the primary changes that we have seen and notified is the population has changed in terms of its composition. During the 1970s and 60s, most of the immigrants, for example, were coming from the Eastern Caribbean. The Virgin Islands was on its way of serious development. It got into the tourism industry from the late 50s. And so there were not enough workers. And many of the workers were now coming from the Eastern Caribbean, the BVI, Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, and some Montserrat, and of course some from Dominica at the time. And so trying to count these persons, trying to persuade them that in fact their immigration status was not going to be important, they were not going to be deported if they were not legal, etc., etc. Just trying to persuade them that it was important for them to be a part of the process. was not entirely easy. But we recognize, as we do today, that if in fact you were left out and you were not counted, you were doing more harm and more damage to the territory itself for the next 10 years. Because the federal assistance programs, and we can talk about that in a while, assistance programs depend on the numbers that we generate. So if we undercount, it means that we are really withdrawing funding for the territory in that sense. And so today, while it is not as intense as it was in the 1980s and the 1990s, today it's of a different sort. Most of the more recent immigrants are coming now from Haiti, from the Dominican Republic. And so we now have to shift our means of counting the others to this particular group. Of course, it's a matter of language now in both cases, because there's one hand, the Haitians are speaking their Creole or French, on the other, the Dominicans are mostly Spanish. And so we have to be observant of that and make special efforts to try to get into those groups and again persuade them that the attempt here is not at all to expose them in any way if they're not fully settled, but in truth, in fact, because they live here, because they it's awfully important for us to because because they live here. Of being if you look at specific date of April, which is the census date, and there would be there would not be asking any question about this status one way or other. So those are the primary changes that we have seen.
Great, thank you. Ms. Sutton, how do you all get the group that you have? How many support employees, workers, how many people are out there trying to count these numbers?
Okay. Thank you for having us once more, and good morning to your listening audience. When we began the process of recruitment, to date, we've had about over 500, at least on the St. Croix district, exactly 501 individuals who have applied to the census office through whether it be for the office work or for field. Currently, we have 54 individuals who work in the office on different shifts. We have approximately 31 individuals who work in our contact center, again on a shift basis. And in the field, our numbers have dropped drastically. And we now have roughly 197 individuals in the field. So managing, managing those individuals takes some coordination. There are different areas in the office that work in conjunction with both the field, the persons in the contact center, as well as our office operations.
So tell us, what have been some of the challenges that you have, and how can we help in the community to make sure that we're all counted?
Well, predominantly, in the beginning, I would say we did have some areas and some individuals who were sort of resistant on a whole just to be counted. I remember back in early January, one of the things that we had done to encourage the community to participate for the first time on St. Croix, our census workers, we went out into the festival parade. We were out there trying, we drove the census truck through, we were giving out paraphernalia, we were promoting the census. And I remember, interestingly, we were speaking to individuals, and some persons were excited about census being here, and some persons were very adamant that they didn't want to. And throughout the course of the parade route, we had some persons who I would say were converts, because after speaking with them, I remember, staying on that tent and having almost like a revival with some individuals, where, once we started explaining to them the purpose behind the census, why it's important for them to participate. And that, of course, at that time, people were asking about the citizenship question.
Right.
And, those fears were dispelled based on the information that we shared with persons. So even though we've had that initial challenge where people just didn't want to participate, and that was a small segment of the community, of course. Later on into March, we had COVID. And that became a challenge, not only for the community to want to participate, but also for our workers to want to continue with us, because people had that fear. But we've worked very diligently in getting an understanding. And of course, we couldn't keep people who didn't want to stay because of that fear. And those fears were real. Some persons had relatives who had underlying conditions that they were the caretakers of. Some persons, even for themselves, had underlying conditions that caused them to feel anxious about being out there. And so we had to take those things into consideration, and we had to understand and be empathetic with those individuals. But those who stayed with us, thank you very much, guys, if you all are listening, for being a part of the census, because of the value that it is to our community. And so we've, launched a very active campaign in terms of sharing information on the airwaves, sharing information as best we can now, with knowing that we can't do some of the things that we had planned all along, and going out into the communities, going out into and meeting with civic groups. But a lot of these things are now being done virtually or remotely, or in a drive-by situation. And so we continue to share information to encourage persons to participate.
I know that for members of Congress, that became a huge issue last year, was the notion that they were going to put a citizenship question on there. And we knew that that would be discouraging for so many people to list that on there. And we really fought quite a number of members to make sure that that was not one of the questions, because we wanted to keep that fear away from individuals. That meant that, potentially if someone was undocumented in their home, that after they completed the census, that then that information may be used to have them deported or have them go through any process. So, I'm grateful that the citizenship question is not there. And, we're also very concerned because you have a deadline of October 18th. And we know that with the pandemic, there have been real delays in being able to get out. So it's even more important that, we quickly get this done, because you all are coming up on a deadline where you will no longer be able to be counted. Can you share with the people who are listening what kind of information the numbers are used for, and why it's so important for the Virgin Islands Miss Sutton, you said that you were under a tent doing a revival and a conversion. I need your some of that revival preaching right now as to why it's important for people to be counted.
Okay, so it's important. We typically say, and I say it quite often, even in the ads, in the stateside ads that we see here as well, we get the information that, the being counted and having the census conducted helps with roads, helps with schools, helps with to know where to build hospitals. And those things are important, and that is true as well. But things that might resonate more with our community, or with even communities across the United States as well, is that the census information that we glean from the questionnaires also helps with persons in public housing. It helps us to know, okay, how many persons are there? What are the ages of those individuals? What type of services that they need within public housing? But it helps us with education in a broader sense, that it would help us to know what are the ages of persons in school. What are the ages of the individuals that we have? What school age children that we have? It helps us in education and knowing what do we need to provide for school lunch, the kind of resources that they need in public schools. For example, if we have individuals who would need English as a second language, what numbers that we need. So those things are more real to individuals, to know that if they provide the information to us, the questions that we ask, it's really because we need that, so that that information could better help policymakers, could better help individuals who are grant writers. Areas such as the Department of Health that needs, information so that they can get grants to provide services for individuals, Department of Human Services as well, the hospitals as well, persons with disabilities. We need to know how many disabled persons we have in the territory and where they live, and the types of services that the government would be able to provide for those individuals as well. So these are some of the things that we would glean from the questionnaires, and these are the things that we need to help us better serve our community. And like Dr. Mills said, 10 years from now, if we have that information, that would continue to help us until the next census.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, for us as the member of Congress, as the delegate, I'm concerned because having these numbers determine how much funding we receive for school lunches. How much I'm able to say that we need for food stamp, for SNAP program.
Right.
How many people need Section 8? Do we need an increase in funding for Section 8? Are those people able to, I know right now there's a shortage of available housing for people that are in Section 8. Having that kind of information from the census is really important. Do we need to have additional buildings built, affordable housing, public housing? All of that information comes from the work that you all are doing. And of course, from Virgin Islanders filling out the form. I know that you said the number that you can call. If you have not had anybody come to you and need to be filled out, please call 340-718-2020. 340-718-2020. Mr. Mills, you've been doing this a long time. Can you share a few tips to a few quick points to dispel myths people have about the census? That could be someone in our office.
Well, just to add to what Ms. Sutton was just saying, and points you have identified, areas from which the territory benefits. Of course, there's in addition, there's a WIC program, child care subsidy, fire department, roads. All of these are programs that are federally funded, but they are tied to these numbers. And an equally important fact is that when we do the census this year, the next one is going to be 10 years hence. What is important is that the numbers that we come up with this year are numbers that are going to be used each year from now till 2030. If the population swells by 10%, 15%, whatever, it means there would not because it's just that they're going to be using. And so with that in mind, what we want to have all residents understand that ensuring that we have an accurate count in terms of the number of people who live here at this time is equally important. Also, unlike the mainland or the states themselves, there is an annual count which is known as ACS, a survey population that is done in the American Community Survey is what it's referred to as. That's done each year, and so numbers can be adjusted. The federal programs can be adjusted to what those new numbers are. But we in the Virgin Islands, we don't get a chance to be reevaluated in terms of the actual numbers of people who live here, which is why it is so fundamentally important that we capture the count in as accurate a way as we possibly can. Because if we shortchange ourselves this year, it means this is going to impact us for the next 10 years and not just this single year. So that's an important consideration which I'd like to have residents understand.
Great. Can I ask you, if you can you tell an interesting story about taking census? Do you have any funny stories, any interesting stories? Dr. Mills, you've been doing this from 1980.
This isn't so much of a story, but I think it's important. In 2008, we were sent by the governor to the House subcommittee meeting to plead for an intercensal count of the population in the islands, similar to what is done stateside. This is the ACS.
Mm-hmm.
We made our presentation relatively short. The important point we made was that, just as I said, we don't get counted until the next 10-year period is up. And so we were asking to be included in the American Community Survey because that means it would be more currently reflective of the number of people who live in the Virgin Islands at the given time. The assistant director for the Census Bureau was the one who represented the Census Bureau in that meeting of the House and of the subcommittee of the House. And he said that he didn't know why the Virgin Islands was not included in the annual survey and that he was going to find out. Well, his response to the governor several months later was that the ACS is not conducted in the Virgin Islands because we do not have a street addressing system. If we have streets and we don't have names on them, we don't have numbers on them, they can't do it. And so at least part of the good news is that we have the territory has attracted some funding from FEMA, and we have begun the process of trying to get street names on all the streets in the Virgin Islands. To put up the posts, of course, is going to be a bit expensive, but supposedly the federal funding is supposed to take care of that. And we are sincerely hoping that before the next census, we would have had streets with names. We would have been part of the American Community Survey, so that we get a more accurate count on an annual basis of the number of persons in the Virgin Islands. So that's my little story about this process.
Well, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Ms. Sutton, do you have one?
Well, some of the interesting things that I would say that have occurred over the course of the time that I have been here have been to see persons who, during the course of the pandemic, we had students who returned from stateside because they had to come back home and do, virtual learning, as well as even students who were in the process of being hired on St. Thomas and returned to St. Croix. And they were not really sure of what to do at that point in time. But the staff here, we really sort of walked them through it because a lot of them, it was an opportunity for a job.
Right.
It was an opportunity to give back to the community. For some of them, that's what they actually said to us, that they wanted to participate, to be a part of what they consider history. And so that to me was very warming. Some of them were classmates of my son or my daughter who attended the St. Croix Educational Complex High School, so they knew me. Even though I wasn't intimately involved in their recruitment or even their hiring. But once I saw them, like when we were doing training, and I was able to connect with them. And one of the interesting things that occurred even during their training, because I would go at the end of training to, encourage persons and to thank them for being a part of Census. And what I was told from some of our trainers was that, during the course of the training, these students looked sort of uninterested. They were sitting there, just taking in the stuff, because sometimes it would be either an 8-hour training or a 4-hour training, depending on the schedule. But at the end, the younger individuals, those college age students, those were the ones who were quick on the ball to, they had like these little, it wasn't really like a test, but they were just, asking them questions at the end to see how well they were doing, because some of them, had looked so uninterested. But those were the ones who really knew everything. They could give you, give back everything to them almost verbatim. So, we tend to, and I say that to say that we tend to look at our youth as though they're sort of uninterested in things. They're on their cell phones. They have their little earbuds in. But they're really, really interested and really in tune. And we just need to give them an opportunity, to be a part of what's going on now. And to hear from them and to listen to them, because they even too at the end had some interesting recommendations to our trainers in terms of how they could even get them to be interested in the training. So that was for me one of the interesting things that occurred.
Great. In some ways, I feel like the pandemic has been so painful to us, but there are ways that we've been able to use this to our benefit. Right now, you've been able to get young people who necessarily wouldn't have been home, but because of the virtual setting, they're back home in the territory, and in the evenings can be a part of the census. For all of my Jewish brothers and sisters, Happy New Year to you. It's Rosh Hashanah. Yesterday evening, the St. Thomas Synagogue had a virtual Rosh Hashanah celebration, and I was able to participate in the Miami airport because everything is virtual now. So we're able to do some things that we would not have normally been able to do. So I usually close out by asking a question of you all, of people. Favorites. Has there been a movie? People are watching a lot of Netflix and Amazon Prime and HBO now. Or is there a book that you would recommend to people that you have read recently that you think would be really fascinating? So a book and or a movie that you can share with our audience. I'll go first to give you a moment to think.
I haven't been looking at many movies apart from work. We have a farm, so I'm busy. But
what have you been growing?
We're raising layers, chickens, and we do some broilers on occasions. So that's what we're into. We have some produce, but it's mostly for our own consumption.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to show you, I'm going to take some pictures and post them for everyone. During the beginning of the pandemic, my husband, who spends the majority of his time in DC, started a COVID garden. And it has taken over the yard.
Cool.
We have tomatoes, peppers, collard greens, cabbage, squash, beets, arugula. We have salad, and then all the herbs in this garden. But now it's going into the grass. We've had to like get crates and move it because, you know, the cantaloupe and the melons and stuff have been moving aside. So I started it, but yes, Farmer Jonathan has taken over the growing. And I think a lot of people have been farming in the last couple of months. I went to the farmer's market, and I love that Commissioner Positive Nelson has moved the farmer's market on Saturdays to the agricultural grounds. I think that's an excellent location for it. And there's some great stuff there. Aside from farming, have you read anything?
Yes, I have been reading, and I'm almost done, a book by Bishop Tutu. It's called God is Not a Christian.
Interesting. That's provocative.
Yes, it is.
That gets me to thinking. Okay. Mr. Mills?
Well, this is self-promotion, though it's not intended in that way. I wanted to refer to a mystery novel that I wrote a few years ago.
Okay.
And it still exists, and really I'm just waiting for a little more time to do another one. As soon as I get out of the business of this kind of work, I can use my time to do that. It's a story in the island, one of the islands, just as it could have happened on any other island in the Caribbean. So that's my piece, and I just want to get on with another one just for the fun of it.
What's that?
Well, the name of this one is The Last Witness.
Okay.
It's about youngsters going up, and you know, there's a murder case, and how is it resolved, and who was responsible, and all that sort of thing. So that's my piece, my piece to add to this.
Okay, awesome. Well, I have been, people may know I've been reading for like 2 weeks now, a book called Caste. It's by Isabel Wilkerson. She wrote Warmth of the Other Sun, which talks about the Black migration from the South into the North. But this book, Caste, is about how India, America, and the Nazis used caste as a mechanism for, you know, control and for power struggle. And, you know, it's related to the system of caste that is here in the United States and how embedded it is in, you know, how the country actually operates. That's the social caste. Yeah, it's called caste. It's just really fascinating. And looking at the parallels with India and their caste system. And even how the Nazis really studied the American caste system that we call slavery or Jim Crow, or even colorism, and utilized it as part of their quest for a supreme race. And then I watched a movie just recently. It's called A Hidden Life. And it was the untold story about an Austrian farmer who refused to sign a loyalty pledge to Hitler, and eventually was executed for it. That there were lots of prisoners during World War II from Germany and from Austria who refused to sign loyalty pledges. And, you know, we never talk about them. We don't even know that there were people like that. And this was the movie. The movie was saying that, you know, People kept telling him, if you would just sign the paper, you can think what you want. Just sign the paper so your family can live and you can go on. And he really believed in this principle of, that God was watching him. And that he, even if no one knew what he was doing, if he did not go down in infamy, that if his life was hidden, that was still important. And I think that, so many of us every day in our lives, we're going about and doing our work, and the people that you see on the news or, even on Facebook that seem like they're getting likes and they're influencers, we call them. I think what's more important is our hidden life, that life that we lead that people do not know about, the life that I believe we will be judged on that final day is much more important than what people see that we are doing. So for those of you who are the census workers, Dr. Mills, Ms. Sutton, thank you all so much for the work that you're doing, not only in making history, but ensuring that Virgin Islanders are counted, that people know that we are here, they understand what our needs are, what our accomplishments are, what is working well, what our continued needs are here in the Virgin Islands. And please, people, 340-718-2020. If you have not been counted, it is so important for you and for history and for your family and for the needs of the territory to be counted. I'm absolutely really concerned in 2 years from now, once these numbers are set, what this may mean for funding for the Virgin Islands and loss of funding that may happen if we are not counted appropriately. We know that we have already lost population from the last census from 2020.
Yes.
And so every name, every family, every person is important. So thank you all so much. Japera is always in the background. Thank you, Japera Krieger, who is the person who is running the show behind the scenes. I get my phone call from her, and she tells me what I need to do, what I need to say, what topics I need to. That's young people, right?
Fantastic.
I love we have a breadth of experiences, and we have people who have worked on the Hill 20 years, and we have people who have worked 1 year, and they're also important to make an office run properly, to have that range and the creativity. So I want to thank my staff once again for everything they do. And Ms. Sutton, of course, I can't say goodbye without, please give my favorite sailor, Mr. Kobe, my love, and let him know that we are praying for him and all of our servicemen and women who are out there. Last weekend, I had the great honor. I was on St. Thomas on Sunday when some of our servicemen came back from deployment overseas, and so glad that they're all back home safely with us. And I want to thank them and all of our veterans for their service to our country and to the world.
Yes.
So,
thank you. I'll pass on your message. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you for allowing us this time on your program.
Sure.
Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.